Well, this past Sunday was the fourth and final planned message in the series that I've been preaching called The Christian's Identity. The simple reason why I wanted to preach this series was we live in an age and a time when there is an identity crisis promoted by the world and a lot of the voices in media and around culture that are vying for primary influence on who we ought to identify as. And there's all kinds of ways that can come about. But ultimately, as Christians, we need to be the people who are least confused about our true identity and most sure about who we are and then how we are to act because we know who we are. And so this week, I looked at Jesus' teaching in Matthew chapter 5, where he says of his disciples that they are the salt of the earth, or the light of the world. And this is, Jesus uses the analogies of salt and light because they are so clear and obvious. Salt has different purposes. Even back in Jesus' day and before, it had medicinal purposes. Ezekiel refers to the fact that symbolically talking about Israel as a discarded infant, that they weren't even rubbed with salt or water when they were born. It also has flavoring purposes, as we would understand, in which Jesus references here in this context, that salt is good to flavor food. Job says, can you eat some bland foods without salt? In other words, it makes it difficult. But it also has a preservative quality where you can put it in meat and whatever else to keep it for longer periods of time. And so any of these, particularly probably more the preservative or the taste aspects of salt is what Jesus is referring to here. But this is, the disciples are to maintain their saltiness. Now, in our day and age of processed and purified pure salt, we don't have the problem of salt becoming not salty. But in Jesus' day, the salt was not a purified version. It was mixed with other kinds of materials, and it could become worthless, not salty. And so, if that happened, it was not even good for manure. It had to be just cast out, and it was garbage. And so, Jesus says the disciples are salt, and they are not to lose their saltiness. Similarly, the disciples are light, and they are to let that light shine. You don't light a lamp and hide it. You don't turn on a light and then shut, unless you live, I suppose, in our day and age, you don't turn on a light and then leave the room, kick everybody out of the room. You light the lamp so it can show whoever's in there what is in the room. And these are intrinsic qualities of light and of salt. They're there for that purpose. Light is there to illumine, salt is there to flavor, to preserve, or to use for some kind of medicinal purpose. And for them to not be used in that way, or to not be good for that, is foolishness. It's ridiculous. And so Jesus, his point is that disciples are to stand out, and they are to be salt, be light, so that, it says here, verse 16, that men see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. This is the purpose. We're to be this way, so it points back to God. And ultimately, Jesus, his message, even the disciples picked up on in the Acts of the Apostles, Paul and Barnabas, when they are essentially changing or taking their ministry to the Gentiles primarily, they quote the same kind of reference here that Jesus referred to in Acts chapter 13, verse 47. They're saying of themselves that God has placed us as a light for the Gentiles, that we may bring salvation to the ends of the earth. And he says that's part of our mission. We are doing that. So because they are reflecting the light of Christ and doing what Christ had commanded, they are bringing light to the Gentiles. And that was part of their mission, and that's an important reality. So this is part of that light, and then that we're to do. And as far as salt goes, we're to remain salty. I think the conclusional statement I had in my sermon was, be salty and shine. And ultimately, when it comes to interactions with individuals, we need to season our actions with salt. We are to have even our actions, our conversation, markedly different than those things that go on in the rest of the world or rest of society. Jesus says in Mark chapter 9, verse 50, salt is good, but if it becomes unsalty, with what will you make it salty again? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. We are to have this quality that is preservative, that is good, that is sweetened. I suppose it's mixing sweet and salt, but you get the idea. It is flavored in a pleasing way, all the things that we do. Or in Colossians chapter 4, similar kinds of things, Paul says, let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person. So we are to have our speech and our conversations be seasoned with salt, to bring grace, as Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4. Let no unwholesome word, but only those things which give grace according to an edification. So we are to be salt and light. Jesus has, he said we are salt and light, and we are to then be salty and shine. And that comes out in our actions, that we are going to act in accordance with who we are and how God has now made us. And we are going to let that shine so that men can see those good works, those things that are good and pure and worthy of praise, and glorify God. So our actions are to reflect God and to point to God. So part of a Christian identity, we're salt and light, and we are not those who ought to cover up our light or become tasteless in this society. We need to be those who flavor all things in Christ. And light exposes both the good and the bad. Sometimes light just shines the path when you can walk ahead in a dark night, but it also exposes those things that others would want hidden. And so there's this large picture of what it means to be salt and light, and we are to do that as Christians because, as Jesus says, we are salt and light in this world. So we missed you on Sunday. Pray that your week is going well. We'll invite you to come to our Bible study on Wednesday or this coming Sunday for morning services. So God bless you. Have a wonderful week.